Today we'll be starting with the seventh chapter, that is sources of business finance. Now, first of all, we need to understand that why do we need finance? What is finance? Finance is nothing else but money. ठीक है, हमें business करने के लिए why do we need money? Right? Now, basically there are two requirements: your fixed capital requirements and your working capital requirements. Fine. So we basically need finance to fulfill our working capital requirements and the fixed capital requirements. Now, what are fixed capital requirements? That is the amount of money that the business requires to acquire fixed assets. Okay, that is your building, your plant and machinery. ठीक है, जितने भी ये बड़े खर्चे करने के लिए पैसा चाहिए होता है उसको हम बोलते हैं हमारी फिक्स्ड कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट्स. एंड दीज फिक्स्ड कैपिटल एक्सपेंसेस दे आर नॉट इनकर्ड ऑन डेली बेसिस. ओके, दे आर इनकर्ड वंस इन अ लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. एंड देन वी हैव आवर working capital requirements. Working capital requirements, they are basically the amount of money which is required to carry out your day-to-day expenses of the business. Alright, making the purchases of raw material and for the upkeep of the fixed assets that we've bought. Right? So basically it is to fulfill these two requirements, that is your fixed capital requirement and the working capital requirement, that we need finance. Right? Now after that, coming down to classification of sources of finance. In this chapter basically we will be studying what are the different sources from where we can get, from where the business can get money. Right? Now the basic the basis on which we can classify sources of finance, number one is on the basis of duration, that is a time period for which we require money. Right? It can be categorized into three parts, that is your long-term finance, long-term sources of finance, medium-term sources of finance and short-term sources of finance. Right? Now long-term sources of finance would be wherein when we require money for a period more than 3 to 5 years. Okay? Now if we are able to, if I am taking a loan, let us say from the bank for a period of about 10 years, that is a long-term source of finance. Right? Medium-term source of finances, medium-term source of finance when we require money for a period more than 1 year but less than 3 to 5 years. Okay? And when we talk about short-term sources of finance, that is from where we can get money only for a period less than 1 year. Alright, I repeat, long-term sources of finance which are going to give me money for a period more than 3 to 5 years. Right? Medium-term sources of finance which are going to give me money for a period more than 1 year but less than 3 to 5 years. And short-term sources of finance which are going to give me money for a period less than 1 year. Right? Secondly, we can also categorize them on the basis of ownership. Alright? It can be categorized into two, that is your owner's fund and your borrowed funds. Okay? Owner's funds मतलब owner के खुद का पैसा, ठीक है, उसने कहीं से बाहर से अरेंज नहीं किया है. ऑलराइट, मैंने बिजनेस शुरू किया, मेरे पास कुछ पैसे जमा थे, वो मैंने सारे के सारे बिजनेस में लगा दिए, दैट इज योर ओनर्स फंड. राइट? नाउ व्हाट आर द फीचर्स और कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ ओनर्स फंड्स? नंबर वन, इट्स अ परमानेंट सोर्स ऑफ फाइनेंस. जब वो मेरा खुद का पैसा है, मैंने अपने बिजनेस में लगाया है, तो जब तक मेरा बिजनेस बंद नहीं हो जाता, खत्म नहीं हो जाता, इट इज गोइंग टू रिमेन परमानेंटली इन्वेस्टेड इन द बिजनेस. दैट्स व्हाई इट्स अ परमानेंट सोर्स ऑफ फाइनेंस. ठीक है? देन नो चार्ज ऑन एसेट्स. इसका मतलब क्या है? ये आपको काफी जगह ये वर्ड सुनने मिलेगा, नो चार्ज ऑन एसेट्स. इसका मतलब ये है, कभी आप अगर उधार लेते हैं पैसा, I am sure you must have heard of this term, that if you borrow money from someone else, he also needs a security कि आप ये पैसा उसको वापस दोगे, तो he asks you to mortgage your assets. गिरवी रखने के लिए बोलते हैं. सो वी से दैट इट पुट्स अ चार्ज ऑन द एसेट्स. तो जब आप किसी से पैसा उधार लेते हो, यू हैव टू मोर देन ऑफन यू हैव टू मॉर्गेज योर एसेट. बट इन केस ऑफ ओनर्स फंड है, अगर अपना ही पैसा अपने बिजनेस में लगा रहे हो, सो देयर इज नो नीड टू मॉर्गेज एनी एसेट्स, सो इट डज नॉट क्रिएट एनी चार्ज ऑन द एसेट्स. लास्ट इज योर कंट्रोल ऑफ मैनेजमेंट. द कंट्रोल ऑफ द बिजनेस अफेयर्स रिमेन्स इन द हैंड्स ऑफ द ओनर्स. Okay, if you more than 50% of the capital, if it belongs to you, then the entire control of the business is going to be in your hands. 51% shares अगर आपके पास है, so the control of the business is going to be in your hands. Contrary to this, we have बोरोड फंड्स, बोरोड फंड्स मतलब जो मेरे खुद के नहीं है, मैंने कहीं और से अरेंज किए हैं, किसी और से बोरो किए हैं। फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन से बोरो कर सकती हूँ, बैंक से बोरो कर सकती हूँ, फ्रेंड्स रिलेटिव से बोरो कर सकती हूँ, राइट। बट उसके फीचर्स क्या हैं? इट इज नॉट अ परमानेंट सोर्स ऑफ फाइनेंस। क्यों? बिकॉज इफ आई हैव बोरोड इट फ्रॉम समवन, आई विल हैव टू रिटर्न इट, आई विल हैव टू रीपे इट, fine. Then I'll have to repay it, not only the principal amount, I'll also have to pay interest. आप किसी से भी पैसा उधार लेते हो, nobody gives you money free of cost. They charge an interest for the same. All right. So it's not a permanent source of finance because the principal amount has to be paid back. Not only the principal amount, but also the interest also has to be paid. Then it creates a charge over the assets. If you are borrowing money from someone, you may have to mortgage your assets. No control on the management. We treat these lenders or creditors, they are treated as outsiders. They do not have a right to participate in the management of the company because आप तो पैसा इनसे सिर्फ थोड़ी देर के लिए उधार ले रहे हो, you're going to repay it. All right. So this was the basic difference between your owner's funds and your borrowed funds. Third basis is on the basis of generation. ये दो ही होंगे इसमें, internal sources of finance and external sources of finance. Internal sources meaning something which is generated from within the organization. Fine. For example, अगर मेरे retained earnings, ये हम आगे समझाएंगे आपको, retained earnings is that if I have earned huge amount of profit, तो मेरा मन नहीं है कि इसको मैं shareholders में बांटूं. What will I do is I will reinvest this in the business. ठीक है, बिजनेस की बेटरमेंट के लिए और नई प्लांट एंड मशीनरी खरीदने के लिए मैंने अपना प्रॉफिट दोबारा से रीइन्वेस्ट कर दिया. This is an internal source of finance. External sources of finance is something which is arranged from outside the organization. Loans from bank, loans from financial institutions. These are your external sources of finance. So we've covered basically on three bases. We have classified the different sources of finance on the basis of duration, short term, medium term and long term, on the basis of ownership, owner's funds and borrowed funds, and on the basis of generation, internal and external. All right.